Everyone. Welcome. This is a really cool opportunity to have I think, a really fantastic conversation. Lynn, I really just want to extend some appreciation for your content and what you do, and I'm really happy to be able to have a chat with you about your background and some of your Enochian working and sort of maybe some vision of the voice conversation. But welcome to Esoterica. I really appreciate you coming on and chatting with me.
Wow, thank you so much. It is such an honor to be here and to be on your channel and connect with you over what I consider a mutual interest in Enochian.
Yeah, I think that'll be again. There's a lot of things we're going to get into, and I'm sure it'll be interesting for lots of reasons. But would you mind just introducing yourself a little bit to the audience and kind of let folks know a little bit about your background, your origin story, kind of what you're working on these days?
Yeah, absolutely. So my name is Maevius Lynn. You can call me Lynn. I am a ceremonial magician and an occultist whose particular focus of my path is Thelema. I am an artist, writer, lecturer, and YouTuber. I currently live in the southern United States where I am very active in my local pagan community. I also serve as a local officer in the OTO or Ordo Templi Orientis, and a large part of my efforts go into my in-person community as well as online. So I stay active.
Yeah, it sounds like you. There's a lot of commas after your name. You sound busier than me, so I'm sorry. My condolences.
Thanks.
Uh, so people don't like accidentally become esotericists. They don't accidentally. You don't wake up one day and accidentally become an occultist. So the thing that you end up through some journey. There's always some journey
Yeah.
story there. And I'm just kind of curious, and I know this could be just this one question. I'm sure it could be just a very long, hour-long conversation by itself. But how did you end up in the world of esoteric spirituality or the occult or Thelema? What did that journey look like in brief, if you can tell us?
Yeah, so my villain origin story, a little bit of a joke there, but my origin story started all the way back in middle school and high school. I went to school in Florida in a really conservative area, and there was a huge push at the time to remove what was deemed inappropriate literature from not only my school's library, but also the public library. So the books that were removed were any book that mentioned an LGBT character at all or an LGBT story. So those were gone, including any book that had something to do with evolution. Those were gone. And there was just a really gigantic purge of literature. So, a large part of my interest as a kid was reading. I loved books. I was interested in science. I was just a very curious, introverted child. So, for my precious library to suddenly be without so many books, I was really sad. So, my only option at that point of what to read in the library, and of course, this was pre-internet, being what it is today. You couldn't just go read things like you can now. Um, my main outlet was the library. So anyway, I could either read children's books like Clifford the Big Red Dog, or I could read straight from the source philosophy. So I was like, well, I guess I'll read Camus. And so the first books I checked out were all about existentialism, and I didn't understand it at first, but I had nothing better to do. I was very bored in my classes, so I just started reading it over and over and over again until the little bits and pieces started sort of clicking. And then eventually, my one fatal misstep on this path I'm currently on, or step, if you will, was reading Friedrich Nietzsche. And I just in that moment I had arrived. I was like, well, I need to learn more about this esotericism. So at that time, it was really hard to get access to some of the occult literature from that launch pad, and certainly anything related to Thelema or Aleister Crowley. No question, I was going to get any of that stuff. But at the time, I never heard of Aleister Crowley. So I connected with other people interested in philosophy through the internet. And I kept a blog through, I think, LiveJournal back then and all of that good stuff. So I connected with these amazing people who were interested as well. And they had access to books I didn't have access to, which I absolutely loved. And those people happened to be this might be scary for some people, but don't be afraid. But these people were in the Church of Satan. And I never joined the Church of Satan, but some of these people had some really cool books. And so I sort of stuck around in that, I don't know, milieu of the occult circles where I first learned of Aleister Crowley. I was like, oh, yeah, he has some interesting ideas. But yeah, I put him aside went to college, went to grad school, did all of that, and it wasn't until much later in my life that I repicked back up Crowley, and he became really a focus in of my passion and my study. And my focus then really narrowed to Thelema in particular, and that's where I've been ever since.
The existentialism to the Lima pipeline. It's a very,
Yeah.
I think it's a real thing. I think it's certainly the Nietzsche to Crowley pipeline.
I,
Definitely in that, and in general, when young guys are on that path, I know which way to run. But I think I don't trust any dude below the age of 50 reading Nietzsche. But I think we give special dispensation to women. Well, that's interesting. I mean, again, this would be it's an interesting oral history to to collect
Mhm.
a bunch of people's sort of journey to esoteric spirituality. Because I always find that conversation interesting because, like I said, no one just sort of like you can sort of accidentally end up Baptist in the South.
Yeah.
That is a thing that happens to millions of people. You don't accidentally end up at Thelema, a Thelemite, and so um, what draws you to Thelema? What about that path? Uh, what about that spirituality really what draws you in?
Yeah, so for me, it's the unapologetic embrace of what it means to be a divine being and to be human. So, um, I don't have to tell a lot of your viewers, but one of the core central tenets of Thelema is do what thou wilt shall be the whole of the law, which does not mean do what you want. It means align your actions with this thing we all have called our true will or our innermost spark of divinity. So it's quite a narrow tenet that forces us to aspire to be ourselves. So it's a moral framework, it's a philosophy, it's a system of mysticism pushing you into a knowledge of self and a knowledge of divinity, and then pushing you with the skills you've made along the way to act on that, to not only do your will, but to not only know your will, but then to do it. And that to me really spoke to me personally. And not to get super personal here, but it is a part of my story as being someone who's queer and very queer. Most of my life I spent identifying as a lesbian and dating other women. And all around me was religion's overarching cultural narrative that was telling me I am less than, telling me that I don't belong or that there's something wrong with me. But Thelema explicitly allows me, or doesn't allow, makes me be who I am
Mhm.
in a very visceral and beautiful way.
I think it's a powerful statement to like again the idea of do what that wilt. Again, I've met a lot of young guys who take that to be exactly what you said at the beginning. It was do what you want, or ape Aleister Crowley. But to hear it articulated as it's an aspirational thing, right?
Mm,
That one is trying to be one's best self and follow that will, and the fact that it can be so powerful, liberating as a queer person to me is just like
yeah.
testament to how this religion really can be powerful. And of course, Crowley himself, I think we would now identify as bisexual or queer in some capacity, and
Mhm.
one hopes that he also found some ways of liberating himself in that spirituality. What texts, what rituals, what are the things that really grab you either in Thelema or in sort of in your spiritual life more generally? But what are the big texts and rituals that you find to be the most rewarding or the most powerful or the most revelatory? What are those for you?
Yeah, so before I get to the Thelema, I'm just going to say for me personally, something that just moved me so profoundly was Thunder Perfect Mind. And
Mm,
that's the text I continue to come back to for meaning and inspiration. Within the Thelemic circle, I've got to mention the central sacred holy text of Thelema, which is the Book of the Law or Liber Al Vel Legis. And that is a channeled text by Aleister Crowley. It contains three different chapters from, if you could consider it like three different divine authors or parts of Crowley's consciousness. A lot of people interpret the Book of the Law differently, but that's the general gist of it. Something that's also really important to me are other Thelemic holy texts, like Liber Zadi or the Fish Hook, which is an account of initiation, which I think is a beautiful embrace of humanity. And Since we're talking about it, how about also the vision and the voice?
Yeah, we're going to come back to the vision of the voice more in just a moment. It's a text that we both share an interest in. But yeah, let's come back to that. And Thunder Perfect Mind is also a text I find to be uh, just a text of radical fecundity. It's just amazing that we have that text, and it is a text that is amazing. I always tell people if you really want to learn to read Coptic, learn to read Thunder. That's the best text to teach yourself Coptic because the gender switching, it forces you to learn both the genders because the writer of that text gender fluid in a way, and it's really great that it uses that language in such evocative ways. Um, but yeah, we'll come back to maybe some thunder comparisons in just a
Oh,
minute.
yes.
Yeah, yeah, I love that. I love that text. And it is um, extraordinarily beautiful. Um, so, one of the things I'm curious about, and this maybe get will get us into the maybe this will get us into the Enochian material a little bit. And this is sort of the bridge that I have. I'm very lucky that you are doing some Enochian working, and I can connect that back to my research and John D and the work I do in Enochiana, because often I don't get to work much and talk much with contemporary practitioners because I don't work in the contemporary period. But you know, we have the material from D and Kelly, and we have material from Dr. Rowe, we have the material from Crowley and Newberg. And we don't get a system of magic in a
Mm.
strict sense from D and Kelly. We have records of their experimentation. And I think experimentation is really the best word for it. And I'm wondering, for yourself, balancing out tradition versus innovation. This is a sort of always a tension within any religious, any spirituality, any religious tradition. And I'm wondering, with either specifically your Enochian's workings, what you can introduce us, tell us maybe what you're working on, or just Thelema in general. How do you balance that out? What's your approach for sort of negotiating the tradition innovation balance?
Yeah, I think this is a fantastic topic and one worth exploring for almost everyone, in my opinion. But for me personally, what I rely on is scientific illuminism and also art, and the powerful ability of art to reflect this sort of timeless truth and beauty, and using that thread in an almost artistic sense to inform my practice, my beliefs, and how that takes shape, whether that's ritual, a working, what I'm doing there. So, to sort of break that down, what that looks like more specifically, scientific illuminism, um, within that framework, I may not understand the mechanism by which something works. And this goes back to this idea of the spirit model versus the psychological model of Magick, or any of these other ideas of how it works. And I'm not egotistical enough to believe I know how a lot of this stuff works. I don't believe that at all. But setting that aside, I do ask the question, does it work? Does what I'm doing work? And I answer that question through collecting data and experimentation. And so that's where this thing called the magical diary comes into play, which Aleister Crowley, just as an occultist in general, kept an incredible magical diary, very, very detailed. And I believe he kept it not to be like, oh, everyone should do this, but he said, this is how I did it. And this is how you can do something like this as well, which I think is kind of cool. Whether or not you like Aleister Crowley or not, his magical diaries and records are really inspirational. But I do my best to keep that record so that I may refer to it back and be like, all right, did I get what I was going for here? Did I get, at least something interesting? And then eventually standardize the method by which I do my work to produce consistent and meaningful results. So, what does that mean? That means not changing up how I do a ritual every single time. If I'm doing something in Enochian, keep doing it in Enochian. Don't suddenly do something in English. But make sure you can control as many variables as possible. So that's the scientific illuminism part of ritual and magic and all of that stuff. So, on the topic of art, there seems to be a very human impulse to know truth and then share it. So I sort of interpret this as a desire to know the divine, and a desire to transcend your isolation as an individual in this incarnation. So um, I take, with that sort of artistic viewpoint or framework, I take from the past as much as I feel it informs that which I am trying to communicate about myself, about my work, Um, and so that's a really loosey goosey thing. It's a little bit more nebulous and out there than perhaps scientific illuminism, but art is very important to me and how I understand mysticism. And I think that that's just an inseparable part of who I am and what I do.
I mean, I think it makes tons of sense to connect art there. I mean, it's just that, I think of Kant's third critique where, the art and the sublime are connected for Kant. And I've always taken that to be that kind of definitive. And insofar as the sublime and the experience of the numinous, the religious experience, are also connected, then again, the pathway to the numinous via art is totally. I think it's not only reasonable, but it would be odd if it were anything other than that at some level. So I think it's a brilliant combination. And again, this is also a thing I've noticed. Sometimes people like shade on people because they're like being aesthetic.
Mm.
I sometimes see this critique being made of people. "Oh, that's just being aesthetic." I'm like, what else is there? Like aesthesis is like sensation. Like, yeah, aesthetics matter. Like, I don't know. Yeah, it's always struck me as a strange critique that, as if I don't know that a de a de or non aesthetic spirituality strikes me as like just death. Like it just sounds awful.
Yeah, and my mind goes back to Crowley's definition, fundamental definition of magic, which he says magic is the art and science of causing change to occur in conformity with will. So there we go.
Yeah, I always to me it's always seemed like obvious that that the aesthetic side of things matter. Before we turn to the Enochian stuff, one of the many reasons why I wanted to reach out to you is because you're one of the handful of women that I know of working in ceremonial spaces, and let's be honest, ceremonial magic has historically been dominated by dudes, uh, doodly dudes who are very full of themselves. So,
Dude, me dudes, that's so
yeah,
good.
it's magic bros, necro bros, and I want to hear more about your experience of existing as a woman and as a queer woman in spaces that are traditionally pretty dominated by, I mean, let's face it, pretty toxic masculinity.
Mhm.
It's just, I think it's what it is, and I wonder about your experience and how you've navigated that, and did you have to grow a pretty thick skin? Did you had to, I don't know, punch a couple guys? Like, how have you managed to navigate the ceremonial space as a woman and as a queer woman?
Yeah, instead of I'm sorry, when you said punched a guy, I just pictured like a Golden Dawn temple of me just like swinging at someone. Okay,
Hey,
that did not happen.
it's like stab somebody with a ceremonial dagger or whatever. Like, it wouldn't be the most
um,
surprising thing. I mean, some people they just don't listen to anything other than fisticuffs.
So, well, first of all, thank you so much for this question. I think it's a really important conversation to have. I think all of us love the magic. We love the historic texts. All of this is where and that's something I could talk about all day, but it is important to reflect on ourselves and our journey and the spaces we create in the community. And are we cultivating an environment where knowledge from all different voices can be heard and shared? Someone once asked me recently, they're like, why do you care so much about other queer voices? Why do you care about marginalized people? And I was like, well, I've seen this happen over and over again in the community. And I know this is a bit of a tangent, but do forgive me. But I see this over and over again where I see someone young and energetic enter the space, start to write something or make YouTube videos or whatever it is, and they get bullied into silence. They delete their profiles on social media, they're gone. And for me, watching another voice disappear from the discourse and the body of knowledge we have as a community is almost like watching the Library of Alexandria get burned down. I think one of the things that was very interesting for me about Crowley's work was he was a queer person, and his deep exploration of his gender and sexuality um, informed how he saw the divine. And that in turn allowed me to see the divine through a different lens and know myself better. So, yeah, I think diversity of voices is really important. So, in terms of how I deal with and navigate these very toxic male dominated spaces, I'm going to start with a story. And this story goes back to my childhood. So, one of my core memories as a child was, of course, being bullied. And I was very poor growing up. So, that was a natural course of things. And I learned very quickly that at recess, I wasn't allowed to participate in the games the other kids were doing. And I wasn't allowed to touch their toys or sit near them. I was just sort of an untouchable child. And I still wanted to have fun during recess. So instead of worrying about what these other people over here were doing, I made up my own fun games with sticks and berries I gathered, and I just played by myself. I created my own fantasy world. I had my own set of rules, and every recess I would start back up this imaginary world, and I'd just be having so much fun. And I would do this again and again. And soon the other kids came around. They're like, "What are you doing? And you're having so much fun." And I explained my fantasy world. And of course, I let them join in on the fun. And eventually, everyone was sort of playing in on this game and this world I created in my mind. And I ended up with tons and tons of friends. And my status of being poor didn't matter anymore because I was allowed to participate with the other kids and we were just having fun regardless. So, um, there is something to be said for the power of being yourself, regardless of circumstances, and never compromising who you are. And in my opinion, the universe will make a way for you. So, fast forward to now in my occult work. When I first started out, I was bullied, disrespected, and purposely excluded from the boys' club in the beginning. That's a fact. And that sort of bullying manifested in a lot of ways. I won't get into the specifics, but it was clear that I was not welcomed in these spaces. I was treated as less than, and I was not given a seat at the table. So, quite frankly, I made my own table, just like when I was a kid making my own games. So, in the occult world, I went and I did my own thing. I built my own communities, my own, did my own ritual, research, study, and I felt a profound call to truth and the divine that, quite frankly, nobody could take from me.
Mhm.
I was going to express that truth and beauty to the world, regardless of the outside world. And fortunately for me, I have really thick skin. But sure enough, the universe made room for me, and it's still making room for me. So I navigate, quite frankly, toxic male spaces the same way I navigate all spaces. And that's with my own internal force and fire, my own integrity, and unapologetic existence. So, my advice to anyone and everyone, regardless of your path or what you're doing, is to never apologize for who you are. You are divine, not in spite of your humanity, but because of it.
Mm. It's beautiful.
Thank you.
Yeah, and I also like the connection. Also, again, I think both of us share in common too that we come out of the working class, and that also brings, I think, for both of us, a different
Mhm.
attitude toward a lot of this, where so much of both the academic work, but also I think in occult spaces, there's a profound sense of like entitlement that I think like we're used to working to get stuff. We have to make ends meet. We don't get stuff, and
Mhm.
so to hear that kind of working class ethic, like hey, I'll build my own thing. I'm not the least bit afraid of building stuff.
Yeah.
I really appreciate that attitude, and I think it's a beautiful attitude, and ultimately, it's a far more sustainable attitude, and at least in my opinion, than you can't be part of our club. I'm like, all right, I
Yeah.
can make my own damn club. Um, you know, see how that works. So, and you're also a content creator, right? You're doing
Yeah.
educational content on YouTube,
Mhm.
and I'm sure that's also an area where having a thick skin is a necessity. I know a little bit about that. Again, not to the same degree that I think women do as content creators. But how do you navigate those spaces? I mean, those are spaces where objectification is a thing, where how you appear can matter often much more than what you say. I have other colleagues here, women who work in online content creation. And just the
Mhm.
horror stories I hear from them,
Oh, yeah.
boggles the mind. And how do you navigate that? Is there any sort of tips and tricks out there? Because I love to see uh, women, queer people, other minorities
Mhm.
working in online content creation and online education. I think it's incredibly important, but it's dangerous, frankly.
Mhm.
It's really dangerous in many ways. And I was just wondering if you have any other um, insights or encouragement or best
Yeah.
practices out there for maybe women or queer people who want to also do content creation in sort of the occultist sphere, academic or practitioner or both?
Yeah, absolutely. I think this is another fantastic thing to get into and really important. And well, first of all, before I go on my long spiel about this, because I do have a few things to say, I want to say if you feel a calling to be here in this space on YouTube to start a podcast, I think you should follow that thread. And you should not let anyone stop you. But yeah, in terms of this difficult subject, I think ceremonial magic and Thelema in general can be a special kind of isolating. And unlike certain witchcraft spaces, as we talked about before, it's very male dominated, it's full of vitriol, and it's full of misogyny.
Mhm.
So I deal with a unique kind of hate, exclusion, harassment for simply existing that my peers in witchcraft or my male peers in thelemic spaces do not have to deal with. So, for some more background on that unique place I'm in, I do talk to a lot of other writers and creators to not only support their work, but also do better with my own work. I'm always learning. And of course, venting happens on both sides. So I've come to learn that what I see and deal with is often in another league of terrifying compared to what my peers in witchcraft deal with. There is something about this particular area of esotericism that is very hostile towards women, and you have to have thick skin in order to exist. You just have to. As far as the male Thelemite perspective, my partner is one of the most visible, well known Thelemites alive today. And that's not a flex, that's just a reality I'm bringing up to make a point here. He has seen his fair share of stuff for sure. But I am constantly showing him stuff I deal with. I'll pull up my phone and show him stuff. And he is absolutely shocked. He has never had to deal with or been the subject of half of what I have to deal with on the internet. And he had no idea this was going on until I showed it to him. And it honestly breaks his heart. So, yeah, it's really not lost on me that if I was a young man, then my work would be much more highly valued and respected. Um, Now I am very blessed and very fortunate that I do have love and support and amazing people who tell me that they're positively influenced and learn things from what I create all the time. So at the end of the day, I hope my voice can make it easier for other women and those who come after me. So um, I guess the other part of that question was how I deal with it. And first and foremost, mindfulness, which is a weird place to start, but I think it's a good one. So, anyone who's doing anything, but especially content creation, especially social media, ask yourself first and foremost what you are trying to achieve. Why are you making that YouTube video? Why are you creating on Instagram, threads, whatever? And your purpose and your goal should inform your actions and how you manage your communities, how you manage your YouTube comments, what kind of content you're creating, what kind of everything you're putting out there. So within that space, and you get weird comments or unhinged things, if that's not in line with what you're trying to communicate or your mission of using that space, using that platform, delete and block. Word filter lists are your friends on YouTube. Have a nice, robust one so you can filter out things that are not relevant to what you're trying to do. This communities you create and what you're trying to do does not have to be a free speech zone. It's your mission that's first and foremost. So, and another thing that's really helpful too that I found is I don't talk to people on the internet, which sounds really weird. But when you start to get into the weeds of checking messages on social media or whatever it is, that will eat up so much of your time and it's easy to get distracted. So it's again coming back to that mindfulness, refocusing your work, what you're trying to achieve, and how you're spending your precious time will be super useful to you.
I think that's great. I mean, I think those are all tips that just any content creator could use those content. But yeah, I also like really appreciate the um again, like where people sometimes think that like comments and things like that are like, free speech. I'm like, free speech is not an absolute right. It's just
Mhm.
not. And yeah, I think it's far more important for me to curate my YouTube comment so that sane people feel comfortable commenting than it is to like let some unhinged psycho rant on my YouTube channel. So yeah, I think content curation is a really, or comment curation is a really important part of that process. Also, I'll say to my other, straight guys out there, just don't, just don't. Like, if you find yourself thinking, I'm going to comment on this person's appearance, don't.
Mhm.
Like, there's no part of that that's a good idea. I don't know. Um, yeah, it's just bizarre that, yeah, I say bizarre, but of course not bizarre. It's completely normal that
Yeah.
abuse is the against women and trans people is just a normal thing on the internet, and it's just horrible. So my apologies. That again,
Thank
it's like a, it's not apologizing for being who I am. I'm not apologize for being a straight white guy. But
Yeah, yeah.
what I do apologize for is the cultures that get
Mhm.
evolved, that that of bullying, harassment
Mhm.
of people. It's just so disgusting.
And
And also
I
just
think
like,
I think the appearance thing you mentioned is a great example of, like, with intention. So, like, I'm not a beauty influencer, right? I try to clean myself up for videos, but at the end of the day, I'm just an occultist, right? Like, y'all should be happy that, like, I'm not like a troll living under a bridge with books, right? So, I mean, I put some effort, but at the end of the day, yeah, I mean, I'm gonna look a little rough around the edges. So I don't care about those comments because I'm not trying to cultivate discussions around makeup or hair products or any of that. So I try to push the conversations and the spaces I manage into a productive one around the occult or esotericism.
yeah, yeah, yeah. And again, the expectation that women have to look a certain kind of way to be on the internet is just yeah, it's just so, ugh, yeah, so bad. Um, Thank you for the work you do. I mean, again,
Oh, thank you
I
so
know my other
much.
colleagues out there that are, I think of Dr. Angela Puka and other people
Oh,
who are women content creators out there, and it's I'm just so deeply appreciative of the fact that you guys do the educational work that you do, because you have to deal with a whole another layer of abuse that I just don't have. Yeah, I get my share of anti-Semitic comments or whatever, and I'm like, okay, like this Nazis, but like, yeah, it's just know that the work you do is appreciated, and know that, um, yeah, that the abuse you get is not okay, and insofar as I can do anything to, to stamp that down, I hope that I can, and I hope that I do, because I want to be an ally to my other content creators out there like y'all. So let's talk about Enochiana a little bit, because that's kind of, it's kind of where we can connect a little bit in terms of our shared interests. Um, you're doing some Enochian work now. You're scrying the ethers. Um, what does that look like for you? What does that mean to you? How did you come to that Enochian work? I'm just, again, as a non-practitioner, I it's important for me to stay humble in what I know and what I don't know, but also I'm super curious and I'm super interested
yeah.
in folks out there that for whom, for me it's just stuff in books, and I'm
Mhm.
so curious and inspired by the kind of spiritual innovation athleticism that goes into like making this stuff real, that
Yeah.
I'm super curious about that. So tell me a little bit more about what you're doing with the Enochian material, what that looks like, what you're getting. What are the
Yeah.
Enochian spirits chatting with you about?
Yeah. Well, first of all, thank you so much. I'm so honored and to be here and chat with you about this. So I guess a good place to start is like how what's going on with me and Enochian. So of course I'm a Thelemite, and what first drew me to that is Aleister Crowley's The Vision of the Voice. This is a channeled work that represents Crowley's initiation into the grade of Magister Templari. Magister Templari is the first grade in the Supernal Triad, which was traditionally occupied by the secret chiefs and non-physical human beings. And of course, the Supernal Triad directly references the path of return on the Tree of Life and the three highest positions near the divine. So I am not a Magister Templi, but I was hoping this work would be an initiation of sorts for me. And then, of course, there's the other piece that we sort of talked about a little bit, which is everyone told me not to do Enochian. So, of course, that made me want to do Enochian more. um, so, what I think is really interesting was I combined a bunch of different things as a modern practitioner. So I think that the basis of what I do is um, the stuff John Dee did and all of that with the Enochian language. But I also tacked on some stuff from more modern practitioners like Lon Milo Duquette and, of course, Aleister Crowley. So I guess I should first start with my very unique approach, which, as far as I know, no one has ever done. But I chose to do it because of who I am. So, growing up, my mother was an artist, and so the first language I really learned was art. My world was full of art and artistic expressions, arts and crafts, all of that. So, when I approached the Enochian Aethers, I said, "What if, while I'm receiving the vision, I painted them in watercolor?" So that was the first step. So um, I guess I'll start. That's what I'm going for. I'm going for painting the Enochian Aethers. So the temple that we set up is very sparsely furnished intentionally. One of my hangups that comes back to the scientific illuminism, of course, removing variables and potential interferences or influences. So I intentionally remove things with distinct symbols or words. That includes words on incense boxes or T-shirts or something. I just take like tape and I put it over it. Because we're influenced by everything around us, and if the temple is full of words and symbols, well, that could just creep into my mind and, in my opinion, pollute what I'm going for.
Mhm.
So yeah, and for example, when I have people sit in on our Enochian scrying sessions, I'll be like, hey, yeah, I mean, I'm not really strict with jewelry and all that. You wear what you want to wear. You're not scrying anything, but if your t-shirt has like a bunch of logos and like words on it, flip your t-shirt inside out. So that's just not in the temple space, for example.
Mhm.
I'm scrying with my partner. So he wears white as a color of projection. I wear a black robe as a receptive color. I'm going to try to describe this as best I can for your viewers
And
and
you
listeners.
you sent me some pictures too, and I'll put
Yes.
those on,
Oh,
so folks.
sweet.
Yeah,
Perfect.
I'll put those on the screen so folks can get a sense of sort of what you're describing.
Yeah, yeah. Okay, cool. So I'm facing a black scrying mirror that I created and consecrated. Um, Located on the outside of my periphery are candles. And that's a very common way to scry, just right outside my field of vision on my periphery so I can stare into the scrying mirror. Um, and I'm sitting on the floor, and then my partner's sitting in front of me, who's the one who does the Enochian calls. So the format, of course, having a uniform format to go through the ritual, again, draws from a bunch of different things. I start off with a Golden Dawn style banishing, and then I sit in the middle, I say a prayer, and then I recite a mantra, which comes out of Lon Milo Duquette's Enochian work. And so I say this mantra over and over again. Um, in a very melodic sort of way to put myself in a trance. And while I'm doing this, my partner is reciting the call for that particular Enochian aether. And he says it both in Enochian and English. And then I scry. So the scrying itself, of course, it's a vision, so it's a story oftentimes. And how do you paint that in watercolor? That's the hard part. So
Mhm.
for me, I sort of start painting as I'm experiencing, and then certain symbols that are part of the story jump out, and I'm describing it. So there's an audio recording, and then I journal about it afterwards. There's written and audio, but the main thing is the painting. And it's really interesting because for me, um, with the painting of the Enochian Aethers, sometimes it just feels right or it feels wrong. Like the things I'm actually seeing, um, or the story being told is such that I have to keep working at it until I finally get it. So, you can't show motion in a watercolor, but you can capture elements that are just right about the feeling of the vision itself and capturing the essence of the symbolism and the colors and all of that. Um, and then, of course, there's banishing at the end and all that boring stuff. But The really interesting thing about my work, well, first of all, I got results to begin with. I was totally expecting not to get anything at all. I thought I was just going to do this and sit there and nothing would happen. But I actually managed to have things happen, which was really cool. Um, but my Enochian visions are not like Aleister Crowley's and they're not like Dee's. So, what do I mean by that? So basically, John Dee, he understood Enochian through symbols and an elaborate language, and of course he did because he was a cryptographer. Aleister Crowley's fundamentalist childhood familiarized himself with very biblical language, and so of course, with his writing background as well, his visions were apocalyptic and almost King Jamesian. So when I first started this, I was expecting language, right? I was expecting a conversation or something like Crowley had. Completely silent. I haven't had a single verbal command or conversation with the entities or beings or angels or whatever you want to consider them. Instead, I would ask questions and the response would be light. The response would be flashing color. The communication would be shadows, colors changing. And this is weird, right? Nothing prepared me for this. And then to paint that as well is also weird. So, as I was going along, I mentioned this to my partner, and he said, have you read what the artist Leonora Carrington has said about the divine? And I said, no, of course. I'm familiar with Leonora Carrington. I love her artwork. And he said, no, listen to this quote. And she says about her experiences with the divine, my gods have no human forms, only curves, angles, and light. And just like that, I was like, wow, that's it. And Leonora Carrington, as an artist, that's how she experienced the divine. So I think this whole Enochian journey and something I've gotten out of it has really been that all of us as individuals understand divinity and the languages we have access to and the sets of symbols we understand. Of course, the divine would show up according to the language we speak.
Mhm,
So,
mhm. Yeah, I always think of that line from the Quran where Allah says to Muhammad, "I've given you an Arabic Quran." I'm like, yeah, that's lucky because if you'd give him a Chinese one, Muhammad have been out of luck.
yeah.
Um, and so the idea of, yeah, of course, it makes some sense that it's an Arabic Quran, and it makes some sense, obviously, for you that it's a visual space
Yeah.
as opposed to a language space. That's a yeah, it makes total sense, and also there's like it's a neat way of thinking about again like what revelation uh can we're very logocentric, to use that famous phrase of Derrida, right? We're very language centric, and of course insofar as they're divine beings, why would they be trapped in just that?
Mhm. Yeah.
um how many aethers have you gotten through? Are you going the I always forget, like the Crowley went backwards.
Yes.
Yeah, I mean, whatever backwards, I have no idea. But like it's Lil to Tex, is that right? Am I remember that correctly? Um,
Yeah, so
like the
we started with the ones, well, depending on your conception of Enochian, but
right,
the ones closest to Earth, the 30th Aether, and moving up to the first. So
right.
hopefully ending on the first. And I think we're about halfway through. So
Are you
yeah.
trepidatious about the 10th?
Yeah.
This because Coron zone or Coronzom land. Is it which one are you at now?
That's a good question. I think I'm at like 15, maybe 14,
Mm,
15. So we're getting there. And I was very scared before I began this work because people have reported all kinds of things. But in my experience, it's been incredibly beautiful, very peaceful, beautiful, humbling, um, full of love, which is a weird thing to say with Enochian. I know, but that's just been me personally and my experience with it. So
mm,
I'm scared, but I'm not. And it's interesting the intensity of the visions I get, and what's really weird, something I wasn't expecting was to be because a lot of the visions I get either like in the scrying mirror or when I close my eyes was when I saw an entity with my eyes closed and then I opened it again. and sort of like when you stare at the sun, you get those like sunspots. Well, I had an open eye, I guess you would call it hallucination or projection. So I was actually able to visually see that in front of me. I wasn't expecting that. That's intense.
I
Scary, but
can only
I think
imagine.
once you get past the scary part, it's really beautiful to, if you let yourself experience it and what it's trying to communicate or learn from that. I think it's a beautiful opportunity to know yourself better, know the world better, know the divine, and connect yourself to something beautiful.
Yeah, and I think this is a thing that often, and we talked about this a little bit off camera, that Enochian has this, at least now, has this weird reputation of like the Enochian spirits being dangerous and making people
Mm.
crazy. And it's interesting to hear that you're not having those experiences at all. That it's very illuminating and very loving, and I think again this is a instructive thing where people should hear that a
Mm.
lot of the uh, reputation that Enochian magic, at least I've experienced, again as a non-practitioner,
Mhm.
what I've heard, which is funny to me because when I actually read the journals, they're kind of hilarious. Like they're my one of my favorite moments in the John D journals is when the angels confuse a square and a root, and D, being the mathematician he is, has to correct them, and the angels don't know what a square, and they're like, "Oh, no, no, it's a square root." And it's like the angels don't know their like they don't know the math very well, which is
Mhm.
funny to me. And to me, that's like this very hilarious. I mean, it's kind of funny. Like, or the angels make mistakes in Latin. They can't speak Latin very well. And I wish I could communicate that to people. I'm like, this material is not as exotic in some ways as, or frightening, I should say. It's sometimes even comedic.
Yeah.
Um, where the angels make fun of them, which is also funny. Like making fun of. There's a moment where the angels are making fun of Kelly, but and he can't understand what they're saying. It's funny. Um, but
But in my case, you can only make fun of me too much by like flashing light. So, you
yeah,
know.
so yeah, there's only they always they always like they just maybe show you a color you don't like or something.
Yeah.
I don't know. Um, I mean, is there any trepidation about sort of? I mean, the when we were talking about the 10th ether, right, and the vision
Mm.
of the voice, and we'll talk more about the vision of the voice in a minute. But that's like the most dramatic ether that Newberg and Crowley scry. That's where
Mhm.
I think it's the closest. I mean, and you could feel free to correct me, of course, because I'm not a Thelemite, but that Coronzon is sort of the closest thing that one gets to a devil-like character
Mhm.
in Thelema. He's the spirit of dispersion, the spirit of
Yeah.
things coming apart, something like that. It's a spirit of confusion, especially confusing the will. He tempted Newberg with turning into this beautiful woman and threw sand into the magic circle to like destroy the circle so he could get in, and he wrestled with Newberg. So if folks have never read the Vision of the Voice, I'll speak for myself. I think it's the most impressive thelemic text. Period. I think it's. Uh, I love Limor Samach. I love you know the Book of the Law, but to me, the Vision of the Voice, because I'm completely biased toward Enochian stuff, is to me the most impressive text to ever come out of Crowley's entire magical career. And the 10th Ether is to me is the most
Mhm.
dramatic and the most frightening and the most cinematic in many ways.
Mhm.
But is there any concern on your part that Coronzon's gonna show up and you're gonna have to like fight the final boss of Thelema and cross the abyss, or is that a thing that like you're
I
feeling
love
pretty good
that.
about it?
That's amazing. Thank you for that. The final boss of Thelema, yeah. I guess from my personal perspective, Karanzan isn't. I guess just personally, I don't really view him as like the devil or like perhaps the way others would view, the devil or Satan or something or demons. Well, perhaps the way I view Karanzan, perhaps the same way I view Groetic demons, and more like a force of nature, an aberrant thing doing what he does. Um, like anything else, of course, fire is going to burn your hand if you stick it directly in it. If you touch a hot stove, you're going to get hurt. Water's wet. I mean, this is just the way the universe is. And we talk about this entity, this force, this part of initiation that is crossing the abyss or Karanzan. I always think in the back of my mind that this is obviously the way Crowley experienced the tree of life and his initiatory journey.
Mhm.
But my mind goes back to the Suffragette Zero. My mind goes back to so many other amazing thinkers out there that imagined a different tree of life without the abyss. And so, and without the need to cross the abyss. And so I just think about that. I mean, who knows what our journey and our initiation is and what we need to go through and what that looks like for us personally. Just like my Enochian is color and light, sometimes sound, but mostly color and light. And I'm not getting some apocalyptic thing like Crowley did. What does my initiation look like through life? Not just in Enochian, but life in general. It's bound to look different. And I just feel like I shouldn't fear something I don't know. So um, I trust that my journey will look like it's supposed to. I trust my Enochian will show me what I'm supposed to. And if it's painful, it's painful. And speaking of pain, I think there's a lesson to be said there that for scary things and painful things, when I took my confirmation into the EGC, that's part of the ecclesiastical arm of the OTO. Part of that ritual is they slap you across the face or punch you, um, and to remind you of the pain that this path brings. And yes, there are dark times; it is painful, but there is joy too.
Mhm.
And in my experience, the joy far outweighs the sadness and the darkness. So, um, yeah, I mean, who knows? Maybe I'll meet Karanzan one day on my journey somewhere, but who am I to know, you know?
Yeah, and it's not the case that, that Crowley expected to meet Cronzone at the 10th Aether. There's nothing about the John Dee material that indicates that, and frankly,
Hmm.
there's no evidence that John Dee and Kelly ever even tried the Aethers, uh, which is an interesting thing to think that they had it, but they never. There's no evidence they ever did it. Which
So it's
I
almost, and that's the cool thing about the vision and the voice. And I think that's one thing people really enjoy getting into is parsing out what part of his vision was unique to Crowley and his initiation, and what part was more perhaps universal exploration of the divine.
right.
Who knows? But yeah, there is much in there to be picked through and parsed and understood for sure.
Right, and I think that's an important thing to note is that, and you pointed it out quite well, better than I could have. That what happened to Crowley, what in 1910, I think is when he's doing
Hmm.
the big bulk of the Vision of the Voice in Algeria. Uh, there's no reason to believe that's like a universal experience. It just is like him and Newberg out in the desert walking around. Who that's not that's not that's a sample size of one.
Yeah, yeah,
So
for sure.
it's not a predictor for anything anyone else's experience.
Hmm.
Um, Speaking of the vision of the voice, I'm just curious. Like, is this a text that you've studied a good bit? Is this a text that's that you? Yeah, I can imagine it going two ways. I can imagine a Thelemite really studying the vision of the voice before scrying the Aethers, and I can
Hmm.
also imagine a Thelemite intentionally not studying it, so they kind of have a blank slate experience. And I'm wondering, what's your relationship to this? Because it is one of the sacred texts of Thelema, if I'm understanding correctly.
Yeah, so there's different classification of the
Right.
Thelemic holy text, like Class A, Class B, and the Vision of the Voice is a weird one. It's one of the only ones, well, there's another one too, but the Vision of the Voice is Class AB. So, yeah, is that voice of the divine speaking, but the Class B part is the descriptions of Crowley experiencing it. So it's kind
Mm.
of a mix.
Right. And I think, and at least in this edition, they denote it by like red and black coloring
Yeah.
of the font. Actually, I think that's the way it does it in this edition. Um, so what's your relationship to the text? How
Yeah.
are you in that it is a sacred text of Thelema, class AB,
Mhm.
and you're scrying the ether? Did you read it beforehand? Are you reading it while you're doing it? Are you, yeah, what's your methodology or your relationship to to that particular,
Mhm.
uh, to that particular text?
Well, I should say any initiation I go to, or at least the ones of a particular variety, I try to go into them blind. I try not to have spoilers, right? It's like opening a book and reading the end before you start. So, um, I did view my Enochian work as initiatory experience, so I tried to not influence myself as much as possible. The downside is I am a Thelemite. I have read The Vision, the Voice, but fortunately for me, it was years ago, so I did not return to that text before I started my Enochian work, and I tried to uh, set aside Crowley's words and experiences as a sort of a different category than what I was about to experience. That being said, in general, I think this text is a beautiful one, and it's really like a big puzzle. Because, like we already talked about, you have to fish out the pieces that deal with Thelema in general, Perst versus Crowley's own initiatory experience. But this text, The Vision, the Voice, has in it some absolute gems
Mhm.
from entities that talks about being Horus or Babylon. Like this, there's a lot of great stuff in here. So I would say if you are interested in Thelemic things in general, or you are a Thelemite and you haven't read Vision of the Voice, please do so. Um, some good stuff in there.
I'd agree. I mean, like I said, if I were to teach, if I were to teach a class on sort of occult literature, the Vision of the Voice would be up there. Like I said, I
Oh,
think,
awesome.
yeah, I think it's one of the most, um, what's the right way of putting it? I mean, visionary is the obvious word, but, well, that sounds ridiculous. But yeah, there's something that feels to me, I guess, when I, again, as an outsider, that feels, when I read the Book of Lies, it just feels like I'm just being like he's just mucking with me. He's just like making fun of me somehow. I feel like I'm like the butt of a joke I don't get.
Mhm,
And I read the Book of the Law, it feels rushed and it feels like there's something
mhm,
frenetic about it that feels like it's like a train that's out of control. The Vision of the Voice to me feels like a very careful, meditative, um, journey. To
mhm.
me, there's real poetry in it that that really shines through. I love it. I love that text. But for when you think of the Vision of the Voice, and we talked about this a little bit off camera, um, another very powerful ether, I think, is the first ether. And we were talking about our shared
Mhm.
love of Thunder Perfect Mind, and how you mentioned how you feel connected to the first ether in that way. Could you say a little bit more about that if you don't mind?
Yeah, absolutely. So, um, I was thinking about this a lot recently, and in the first Aether, we find out that it is the song, or part of it is the song of Horus. And I was reflecting on that. I thought it sounded a lot like the Thunder Perfect Mind, which is wild because Thunder Perfect Mind had not been discovered yet. So, Thunder Perfect Mind originally was discovered in the Nag Hammadi Library in 1945. The Vision of the Voice, as we already discussed, work was done in 1909 and then published in 1911. So for those familiar with Thunder Perfect Mind and perhaps other texts, let me just read you an excerpt from the Song of Horus in Vision the Voice because this is good stuff. So
Mhm.
this is an excerpt from it on the first Aether. I am light and I am night, and I am that which is beyond them. I am speech and I am silence, and I am that which is beyond them. I am life and I am death, and I am that which is beyond them. I am war and I am peace, and I am that which is beyond them. I am weakness and I am strength, and I am that which is beyond them. Yet by none of these can man reach up to me, yet by each of them must man reach up to me. So, an interesting sort of parallel there.
No, definitely, and I think for folks who haven't read Thunder Perfect Mind, it's also a text that deals in these kind of dichotomies. I am the this and I am the that, often dealing with these sort of opposites. And to my mind, I think that at least when I hear those texts, again, my mind's drawn back to the last major Enochian session with Dee and Kelly, where they come in contact with the Daughter of Fortitude. And the Daughter of
Mhm.
Fortitude also speaks in these kind of contradictory, I am this and I am that. And I wonder, again, like it's impossible to know, but insofar as the first ether was Dee and Newberg, or not Dee and Newberg, Crowley and Newberg's final ether, that Crowley was somehow aware, or I don't know, riffing on the fact that Kelly and Dee's final contact with the Enochian spirits was also the daughter of Fortitude, and I
Mhm.
wonder if that's cross pollinating there as well. I don't know. This
Yeah.
is a good trifecta kind of daughter of Fortitude, Crowley and Newberg, and then Thunder Perfect Mind. Again, like an interesting,
Yeah.
um, I don't know, interesting essay in comparative mystical experiences or something.
Yeah,
Um,
definitely. Yeah, someone write their thesis on that, please.
yeah, go for it. It's not me. Are you planning to like publish your Enochian workings? Like your, I can imagine this being a really amazing art show
Oh, wow.
slash publication. Like you actually
Yeah.
publish the paintings in your journals, and this is that the thing you have in mind, or is it at this point you're just really trying to get through the the uh the Boston Marathon of mysticism with all
Well
30
well,
ethers?
yeah, thank you so much for mentioning that. I hadn't really considered it, but what sort of changed my mind was, there was this, art show happening in Upper New York, at a studio called the Lemon Sky Project, and, uh, so I guess I work with a lot of artists, of course I do, but there's one gentleman locally who is documenting modern day occult practitioners, and it's very easy to find, witches, Wiccans, all of that stuff, but it's much harder to find ceremonial magicians, especially because so much of what we do is secret and private and members only kind of initiatory stuff. But my own personal Nokian stuff, I said, yeah, come on over, document me doing a Enochian, why not? And so he got some really beautiful photos of me doing a Enochian. One of them, it just looks unreal how beautiful it is because it has the two candles, and I'm holding up the wax sigillum de Ameth with the candlelight coming through. Just beautiful photography, gorgeous. And so his work was being displayed at this museum, and like me doing a Enochian was somehow ending up in this museum on this display, and I saw this on social media. I was like, wow, that's me. And there was like pictures of me. I was like, that's so cool. And the curator was like, wait, that's you doing that? I'm like, yeah, that's me. And so she's like, hey, this exhibit's all about alchemy. Could you write a piece to go with this? I was like, heck yeah. Well, anyway, long story short, unfortunately, the museum owner injured himself in a construction accident. So that's really tragic. And so the exhibit never happened. But it certainly got me thinking that wow, people actually care about this stuff and want to see it. But the other funny side note about this is I think first and foremost, I'm an occultist and then an artist second. And I think people from the art world aren't necessarily used to seeing occult workings. So you have to remember, I'm doing this with next to no light and two candles at my periphery, painting in watercolor and rapidly as I'm going through a trance, receiving this vision. So the watercolor is not good. it's this art director looked at it and she's like, "Yeah, we don't want that in our gallery, but we will have you write something." And I'm like, that's right. So I think with these sort of stories and initiations, they are very personal to me, but I think that they may have some more universal value to people. And I think there may be times at some point in the future to revisit these stories and this symbolism and all of that and paint it the way it's supposed to be painted and not in a dark room with two candles with watercolor. So I may make artwork like that in the future, but yeah, if there's interest, I would love to share that with the world at some point.
Well, I say that for completely selfish reasons, and the completely selfish reasons are, us academics who are interested in occult practices. Well, we need work, and so if you're getting visions and stuff, and you can document that, it's the kind of thing
Mhm,
where, at least for me, I'd want to see it added to the pile of the historical pile, like
mhm.
Dee and Kelly and Crowley and Newberg and Lynn, and it
Yay!
all for me, it's I don't make a distinction between the fact that you're doing it in the United States in 2024 and Crowley's doing it in whatever 1910, 1909, Dee and Kelly are doing it in the 1580s. To me, that's inconsequential. What
Mhm,
matters to me is it's a literature. It's part of the literature. It's part of the living body that is history
Mhm.
of this material and this history. So I'll just say again, for totally selfish reasons, I hope that you do keep good records, and I hope you do publish it in a way that one, honors your experience and is representative of your experience, but also two, as a boring academic, I'm interested in how these traditions are alive
Mhm.
and well, and how again this relationship between tradition and innovation is being developed and deepened and that. So that's my completely selfish prod for you to publish, in whatever medium makes sense, and also not to, it's your
Yeah.
personal spiritual journey, and who am I to tell you what to do? But if you do feel inclined to publish it, I would certainly, I'd love to see it.
Oh,
I mean, I frankly, as a person who is interested in the material, I'd love to be a fly on the wall in that kind
yeah.
of room, just because I don't scry the ethers, and I've never seen anyone do it, and it'd be neat to see it. So,
Well, you're welcome anytime if you're in my area, come on by.
yeah, I'll knock on your door. Heard you're
Yeah.
heard you're scrying. Um,
That's amazing.
yes. Well, how do you invite yourself to that party? The scrying party. It's like, yeah, we're not watching Netflix. We're talking to Lil or whatever. Coranzon, God forbid.
Yeah, I'm on the crons on Aether, come on over.
Yeah, come on over. I won't skip that one. That's the one I don't want to show up for. That's like a bad horror movie. It sounds like a bad joke. A Jewish guy works into a Coranzon's crying. No, no. I'll go to one of the more like Fisher Price ethers. Um, so you're scrying the ethers now. Like, any future plans? I know it's like you're halfway through that, so God knows where
Mhm.
that's going to take you.
Yeah.
But sort of future plans and projects. Like, what do you have any future plans for the YouTube channel?
Mm.
Art stuff, religious stuff, anything cooking?
Yeah, I'm cooking a lot of things. So of course the YouTube channel is an ongoing, super fun project. So I make research slideshow presentations, which are oftentimes condensed presentations of lectures I give in person for my local community or at different various conventions. And I really view my YouTube channel as a service to the community. So and I know I'm doing something right when just this last weekend, someone told me they learned how to do Libra Rush from one of my videos. So that's really cool. I love supplying people, especially solo practitioners, getting into the stuff with tangible hands on stuff they can put to use immediately, try out. You don't have to be a Thelemite to try out Libra Rush and possibly get benefits from it. So I think that's a really cool project I'm continuing to nurture. At the end of July coming up, I am a presenter at Mystic South in Atlanta, Georgia. So I am giving an intro to the Thoth deck presentation, which this ties back into what we're talking about earlier, which is how a lot of female cultists over time sort of get brushed under the rug in favor of platforming male occultists. And I think the Thoth deck is one of these where Frida Lady Harris is the creator and the artist and the visionary and the reason this tarot deck exists. Yes, she did pay Crowley to teach her the magic part of it, but she is the Thoth deck. So I'm excited to talk about her and, encourage people to check out this deck and use it.
Mhm.
And then in August, I'm giving a virtual talk at the last Tuesday Society on Thelemic holidays. Yes, Thelemites do have holidays based on the Book of the Law. No, it is not the Wiccan Wheel of the Year. That is something different. Okay. So, and of course, I do a lot of work for my local community and my church. So, baptisms, confirmations, initiations, performances of the Gnostic Mass. I'm always working on that as a beautiful way to give back to the community and continue to make a space for people to experience these beautiful rituals. And of course, I got some few super secret projects in the works. And if people would like to know more about that, be sure to follow me on social media, Patreon, YouTube, any of those places, and you can get updates.
Yeah, and I'll put the links down in the
Yay.
appropriate places, so
Perfect.
folks can find Lynn and follow her work. I think it's work that's, again, as a non-practitioner, as an academic, it's just as like as a human being with the values I have, and I just, it's when I find folks like you, I'm like really eager to platform you and learn more about what you're doing, and hopefully introduce you to a broader audience, and just to
Yeah.
appreciate Um, Again, my practitioner community. Again, like academics can get high on their horses and forget that you know it's not just books. This is a living spiritual tradition
Mhm.
of great intellectual and spiritual depth, and it's a real honor for me to be able to sit across the table, virtually at least, with someone who's really living this out in a way that I find admirable and beautiful. So, yeah, make sure to folks that follow Lynn and check out her amazing work. So, well, then I just want to say thank you for taking some time to hang out with me and chat with me about. Again, I don't take it for granted that people will share what are very powerful spiritual experiences of a marginalized religion with a person who's just an academic. I don't take that for granted. I don't feel entitled to that, and I just want to express my gratitude that as an occult practitioner, you're willing to take the time to share your experiences and your journey and your spiritual undertakings with me. And I just want to again express my gratitude for you and for your willingness to chat with me.
Wow, and thank you so much. It has been such a joy and pleasure, and I admire your work so much. You are such a source of light and inspiration in the community, and your continuing work is so great to watch. And yeah, thank you for everything you do as well, and thank you for having me on.
Wonderful. All right, folks. Well, again, follow in and yeah, I hope I can do more of these conversations with practitioners, both to educate myself better about where the practitioner community is, but also to express my gratitude for what they do and learn from them. Again, I'm not an expert in 21st century Enochiana as much as I can poke my nose in the cotton appendix as many times as I want, and that's nothing compared to what people living breathing people are out there doing. So check out Lynn and her work, and I'll see folks next time.